Good evening, everyone. I'm Jen O'Flanagan, the current co-president of Les Dames d'Escoffier New York, the first and largest chapter of Les Dames d'Escoffier International, which has 45 branches worldwide. Our mission is to advocate, advance, and support aspiring professional women in food and beverage. And one of the most important things that we do is grant scholarships to promising young women. You can find more about us by visiting ldny.org. Tonight, we are pleased to welcome you to the 6th annual Next Big Bite, an on-the-pulse event that evaluates the existing food landscape and uncovers emerging food trends. This year's topic, Home Cook Pro, will look back on the home cooking movement during the pandemic and how this has shaped emerging food trends. We thank Dame Michelle Lawton of Joyful Palate for all of her hard work in ideating and shaping this important discussion, and for bringing this illustrious group of panelists together. Dame Tara Bench is our moderator for this evening and brings rich insight into this role as a trained chef, former magazine food editor, and author of her first cookbook, Live Life Deliciously, which shares delightful versions of classics, her very favorite recipes, and innovative ways to cook with global flavors right from your pantry. Tara, take it away.
Thank you, Jen. It is such a pleasure to be here with everyone, and thanks for that lovely introduction. I'm certainly thrilled to spend the evening talking about the home cook. My career as a magazine food editor has been dedicated to home cooks, and bringing industry trends, innovations, changing diets with recipes that, to those who feed their friends and family from their home kitchens. So this is my passion, and we are very lucky to have talented and diverse people with us tonight. This group is amazing, a group of keynote speakers and panelists, and they'll help us deep dive into this topic. We're especially grateful to our sponsor, Kerrygold. An Irish Kerrygold butter and cheese is made from milk from grass-fed cows raised free from growth hormones on small family-run Irish dairy farms. And I think many of us here tonight are already very familiar with that all-natural milk from those Irish dairy cows, and that it makes the best creamery butter and cheese. And I'm sure we all have it stocked in our kitchens. They are truly some of the most delicious ingredients, and we're lucky enough to have them in our homes and our restaurants. So thank you, Kerrygold. And tonight we will hear from 2 keynote speakers. Then I will give you details on our exciting raffle going on and introduce our panel discussion. I'd like to now quickly jump into our program and introduce our first keynote speaker. And as you may well know, Marcus Samuelsson is an acclaimed chef behind many restaurants worldwide, including Red Rooster Harlem here in New York City. And he was the guest chef for President Obama's first state dinner. I'm so excited to hear from him. He is a New York Times best-selling author and has won multiple James Baird Foundation Awards and has been crowned champion of Top Chef Masters and Chopped All-Stars. And he is head judge of the new show, Top Chef Family Style. Chef Samuelsson is a committed philanthropist, working with the Careers Through Culinary Arts program, which focuses on helping underserved youth, and he co-produces the annual Harlem Eat Up Festival. And during the pandemic in 2020, he converted several of his restaurants into community kitchens to get meals out to those in need. So we all love him, we all admire him. Chef Samuelsson couldn't be with us tonight and has shared a video that we'll watch now. So I'll turn it over to the video.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chef Marcus Samuelsson, and I'm so honored and excited to open up tonight's LDNY Next Big Bite Annual Trend Seminar. It's so important to me to be part of this amazing event because I want to continue to uplift women however I can in the hospitality industry. I wouldn't be here without some amazing people in my life. My grandmother really taught me how to cook, Miss Leah Chase that mentored me, and some of the just amazing women that I've worked with in the industry throughout the years. Obviously, since COVID, it's been extremely difficult for our restaurant and hospitality industry, I think it's really important as communities, as we come together, all cultures, and do everything we can to bring our industry back. The word restaurant means to restore one's spirit, to restore one's community. And I don't know how any neighborhood in America would be without hospitality, without a great, vibrant restaurant industry. Something positive that came out of this was that not just chefs started to cook at home, but everybody cooked more at home, right? So we have more informed home cooks, more passionate home cooks. And same thing for me as a chef. I cooked more for my family. I learned a lot about the struggles and the challenges that home cooks go through that we as professional chefs might not think about. My family and I, we went vegetarian we switched to be vegetarian most of the pandemic, which was fascinating, and I really liked it and had to challenge myself how to cook better and more seasonal and better vegetarian food. So there's always a silver line, there's always a lesson. And I think the more people cook at home, the more informed that we come to back to the restaurants. And obviously takeout has also been a huge part of this, that a lot of restaurants survived and stayed open because of takeout. And now it might be something that they're always going to keep on post the pandemic as well. So I'm still going through and processing what is the big takeaway from all of this. But I do know this, I do appreciate chefs and the culinary and hospitality industry even more. We're an incredible, diverse community. We work extremely, really, really hard. And it's also something that has been there for me during this very difficult time. The fact that I could call on my colleagues was something that really helped me also in terms of mental health. And I think this is something that is very, very important, that we support one another, not just in terms of working, but also in terms of being there and listen. A lot of people lost their jobs and they got their job back. A lot of restaurants closed to never open again. It has particular impact for Black and brown owned restaurants. So I think there's a lot there as a community that we still have to be there to support one another. And I hope the support stays post the pandemic as well, because we're going to need it. I know I will. And the other aspect of this is that work-life balance, which the pandemic completely changed how we're going to approach work, whether I'm going to work from home, whether I'm going to go to office or restaurants. And it's very personal. How do we come out of this as better people, but also how do we contribute better, both so it makes sense for our families, but also so it makes sense to society at large. I think it's something as chefs that we struggle with, and each chef should do it the way it fits her or him. There's not one way to do it. You can't look at, well, this guy's doing this, so I have to do that as well. No, you don't. You have to do whatever makes sense for you. I know it's difficult, it's hard, but this is a long game and you're part of an incredible industry. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for supporting LDNY and its scholarship fund. Through storytelling, through communities, this is one way to heal or come together and support one another. Have a great evening and keep it cooking.
Thank you so much, Chef. I think we can all agree that we're still processing what the big takeaway is, like he said, from the last few years. And we have a lot to talk about, even tonight. I am thrilled to introduce the next keynote speaker, Grace Young, whose accolades and accomplishments could span the course of the evening. She is an award-winning author many times over, lecturer, historian, filmmaker, teacher, and advocate for the New York City's Chinese community. She has been named the Poet Laureate of the Wok and is devoted to demystifying the ancient cooking utensil for use in contemporary and home kitchens and preserving wok traditions. Her cookbook, Stir Frying to the Sky's Edge, won a James Baird Award, and her cook, The Breath of a Wok, was the youngest book to be inducted into the Cookbook Hall of Fame. And these are just a few of her award-winning accomplishments. Grace's advocacy for Chinatown has been written about in multiple publications, and her work in fundraising and support for the AAPI community is so pertinent and ongoing. During COVID, she co-created the video series Coronavirus, Chinatown Stories, which has been shown at the Smithsonian. Grace, let me turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Tara, for your very, very lovely introduction. I am honored to be a part of LDNY's program tonight and to be able to share my unique perspective on Chinatown in the time of COVID. Normally, I'm in Manhattan's Chinatown several times a week, shopping for produce and groceries for my home cooking. But at the start of 2020, Chinatown was strangely empty. Because of the rhetoric coming out of Washington, calling COVID the China virus, Chinatowns all across the country were shunned, and many mom and pop restaurants and stores saw their businesses drop 40 to 80%. By the time we were in lockdown, I took daily walks into Chinatown, and it was chilling to see Mott Street, Mulberry, Pell, Doyer Streets with no pedestrians, no car traffic. In April of 2020, CNN reported that 59% of independently owned Chinese restaurants across the country had ceased their credit card transactions, implying that they had closed. And at the same time, over 233,000 Asian American owned businesses closed across the country. By June, when New York City reopened, it was devastating to discover legacy businesses that had been a part of Chinatown for decades never reopened. We lost mom and pop restaurants and markets that were the heart and soul of the community. I've always preferred home cooking to restaurant food because, after all, I want people to cook from my cookbooks, but I realized without our patronage, we could lose more legacy restaurants. And like many, I continued cooking at home during the pandemic, trying to support Chinatown markets and stores. But since the pandemic, I have probably eaten more Chinese takeout than I have my entire life. Last year, I realized I had taken Chinatown for granted. It had never occurred to me that there could be life without Chinatown. And it's been heartbreaking to see Chinatowns across the country, especially my hometown, San Francisco, struggling to survive. One fact that most people don't realize is that historic Chinatowns like San Francisco, Boston, and New York are all dependent on tourism. In 2019, New York City had 66.5 million tourists. And I would guess in 2020, Chinatown didn't see any tourists at all. The Chinatown customer base was forced to shift to locals, and that has not been enough for businesses to survive. And sad to say, the violence against Asian American Pacific Islander communities continues. In New York City, hate crimes against Asians has increased 356% since last year. Since the start of the pandemic, there have been over 9,000 hate crime incidents nationally against AAPI community, especially targeting the elderly and women. The number is undoubtedly higher because most people don't report crimes. Businesses are suffering because locals are afraid to come to work, to shop, to eat at restaurants for fear of being attacked. And without our support, we could lose historic Chinatowns and AAPI enclaves all across the country. That's why I partnered with the James Beard Foundation and Poster House on a nationwide Instagram campaign that just launched. And all you have to do is just post a video or photo and share a story about why Chinatown, Koreatown, Little Saigon, Little Tokyo is meaningful for you, or your favorite restaurant or business, and add the hashtag #LoveAAPI. The idea behind the campaign is to raise awareness that the AAPI community continues to struggle, and one way to fight the anti-Asian hate is to show your love and support for their businesses. We are a land of immigrants, and Chinatowns, Koreatowns, Japantowns tell the story of what it means to be American. I urge all of you to please support your local AAPI mom and pop businesses. Please reach out to me if you have ideas of how a local AAPI or Chinatown business can provide meals for a food bank or supplies for a senior center. As winter approaches, we need to think outside of the box for any ideas to keep all these businesses going. I thank you for your support, and I wish you a joyful evening tonight. Thank you.
Grace, thank you so much. What a pleasure to hear from you and to hear such detail about the issues that you're working on and the community that we are surrounded by. Thank you so much. I want to share a little housekeeping with all of you before we turn to our panelists. We have the chat window open tonight and welcome you to ask questions. We should have time at the end to have the panelists answer a few, and the questions that we can't get to, we'll collect those and try to answer them on social media over the coming weeks. We will also be hosting an amazing raffle and drawing winners from all of you live attendees here at the event during the panel discussion. So you are entered already just by being here through the remainder of the event. So stay tuned to see who the winners are. The prizes include several cookbooks from our panelists and speakers, and a generous mailed package of $200 worth of Kerrygold butter and cheese as the grand prize. So that is very exciting all around. I'd like to introduce our panelists for the evening: Samuel Dennigan, Jane Freiman, Yves Turopal, and Karen Washington. And let me just give each of them some clout here. Sam Dennigan is an Irish entrepreneur who spent a decade working for his family's fresh produce distribution business and saw an opportunity to bring next generation innovation to what he considers the sleepy frozen food market. He founded Strong Roots in 2015 in Ireland and is now the UK, and it is now the UK's fastest growing plant-based brand. It's expanding to the US in Whole Foods and Walmart stores, to name a few. Strong Roots was just awarded a certified B Corp for its efforts in building sustainability and community, and is well on its way to becoming a global brand with distribution in Iceland, Singapore, and beyond. So clearly we've also got a lot of Irish tonight with Sam and Kerrygold in the same evening. Our next panelist, Jane Freiman, is the founder of the Smart Kitchen Insights Group and is a passionate consumer behavior cooking expert, pioneering the future of the cooking and kitchen experience. As a leader of the Campbell Soup Company Consumer Test Kitchen, she ensured the mindset of a consumer-central product and recipe development platform. Jane keeps a pulse on trending technology, and her career mission is to bring to life the consumer's kitchen and their cooking experiences with this mantra: it starts with the consumer and ends with food. Yves Turopal is the world's leading expert on millennial and Gen Z global food culture and founder of Food for Climate League. She is an author, consultant, and researcher, and in her latest book, Hungry: Avocado Toast, Instagram Influencers, and Our Search for Connection and Meaning, she explores the why behind today's biggest food and lifestyle trends. She also helps companies connect the dots between climate, food trends, equity, and mental health to develop products and campaigns to meet people's core human needs. Karen Washington is a farmer, community activist, and garden advocate striving to make New York City a better place to live. She serves as a board member of the New York Botanical Gardens and works with Bronx neighborhoods to turn empty lots into community gardens. And she is a board member of Farm School New York City, leading workshops on growing food and food justice across the country. Among other prestigious awards, Ebony Magazine voted her one of the 100 most influential African Americans in the country. She is the recipient of the James Baird Leadership Award and is currently the co-owner and farmer at Rise and Root Farm in Chester, New York. Amazing group, and I am very excited to dive right in. In the consciousness of time, I will start with you, Karen. Let me start you off with a question, and then we'd be so happy to hear your platform and your thoughts. A few questions that speak to your expertise. The pandemic has seemed to bring people back to a sense of local. Have you seen this happening with community and farming, and what challenges still exist in that area?
Thank you so much for having me, and a great, great question, because it's about change, it's about social capital and communal wealth. What does that look like? For the first time, people understand who the essential workers are. They're the restaurant workers, they're the farmers, the farm workers. And people started to realize that in order to take hold of this pandemic, they had to eat healthy, meaning eating healthy meant that you could be healthy. And so all of a sudden, people started ringing my phone and my email, wanting to know how to grow food on their front yards, their backyards, on their terraces and windowsills. For the first time, people started to challenge the food system because we saw so many people on food lines and food pantries questioning the food system in a way that, is it fair? Is it just? Is it equitable? And so for me, getting people to understand where their food comes from is critical. Getting people to understand the word of agriculture. And I think sometimes we miss what that means, the culture behind agriculture. People now coming together and realizing that how important it is to eat healthy, that's number one, but also how important it is to sit at a table and to share the harvest. And I think as we go forward, the pandemic has shown us that we're not going to go back. So what is it that we can do collectively to move forward to change the food system? And that is community. And what I'm starting to see now are people coming together as community to challenge the food system, to come up with ideas on how they can grow more efficiently, not growing more food, because we can do that. Our main problem and challenge is that we grow enough food, but that food and waste enough food, but that food is not getting down to the people that need it the most. And so some of the challenges that we're having is access to land, access to capital, access to resources, because now we have a whole new iteration of young people that want to grow food. They want to know their relationship to food and land. They want to eat healthy. And two things that's really, really important that we need to talk about, that at the end of the day, healthy food and clean water are both human rights. So I'll stop there and continue with the panel. Thank you so much for having me.
Karen, that is also important. And I love your focus on community, and you give us very doable tasks to sort of take with us. Thank you. Sam, let me go to you. You're deeply involved with the commercial changes that are happening. Do you have thoughts about the future of digital delivery, like e-commerce, food, et cetera? And what do you see as the emerging business models for these opportunities, like food waste turning into misfits for sale, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, Karen did a great job of putting the foundations of, you know, what we try and do so clearly. We ultimately, you know, a huge part of what we were trying to do during the pandemic is shorten the distance between the consumer and the producer, which is ultimately what our goals are for produce. We have, you know, our objective is to create plant-based foods that are designed for busy lives, but are completely uncomplicated and simple. And one of the things that we were, you know, unable to do during the pandemic was encourage trial of our products. We're very fortunate in that our products taste great because they're super simple and made with, you know, clean, fresh ingredients that are all steeped in agriculture as opposed to being man-made. And, you know, one of the things that we couldn't do is, you know, go into the supermarkets like we normally would and actually, you know, let people try the product. Which we think is incredibly important as a brand. So in order to achieve this, we actually went out in the immediate community here. I'm in Jersey City right now, and found what is known as a dark kitchen or a ghost kitchen, to be able to encourage trial of the product through their subset menu, and actually created a restaurant with an existing restaurateur in the area. At the very beginning of the pandemic, in order to be able to launch our brand. You know, we had only been here for a few months, and we had started encountering problems with supply chain and availability of distribution resources and all of the things that happened. I think what has been really, really interesting over the last 2 years is that, you know, the food system has started to change, I think, for the better forever. I think people have started making more conscious choices about where their food comes from, about what it's made out of, you know, whether it's local, what's the sustainability element of the supply chain, you know, has it burned a lot of carbon or not? And people are start asking questions again, because, you know, people had time, you know, unfortunately for most, but the concentration back to scratch cooking, which is a, particular trend of, recession and now pandemic, people concentrate on what they do and they enjoy the community of sitting around the table again and having dinner parties and being close, connected by food, because it's the great leveler. And the same thing happened in retail. In retail, we had, empty shelves, and we had panic buying. And then that was tempered with a rebuilding of supply chain that's actually still happening globally. We still haven't filled the supply chain from the demand that's been put on better food across the world. And as a result of that, people are looking for food in different places. As Karen pointed out, growing it themselves. My background is from an agribusiness industry, which deals in fresh produce and encourages lots of, grow it yourself programs within the Irish market. And that in Europe actually boomed again as well, on the basis of people's interest in the origins of what they're doing. So I think there's been a huge amount of positive changes. There's obviously been a huge amount of focus on the subject as well. Ultimately, for us as a challenger brand, we're a very, very small player in the US market in comparison to Europe. It's been good for us to learn, how to do what we do in the most difficult times, and we've been lucky enough to be able to keep going. The food system was an essential service. We had to go to work. We had to make sure the products got through to the supply chain to the supermarket, and as a result of that, we actually created a huge positive culture about our importance in the larger industry from internally, from a staff and employee point of view. So it's been an incredibly interesting couple of years.
It really has. Thank you so much. That is fascinating. And I love your perspective. And I think we can all agree we're excited to get back together and gather together again, but with a new perspective on where our food comes from and those strong roots and local. We've all learned from this Zoom experience, and that takes me to Eve. Eve, with your insights, how has technology enabled us to connect around food? And do you think there's been isolation in that as well? We're connecting, but also isolated. And I would love for you to speak to that thought of emotional recovery and why restaurants are also essential for us in connecting all of that.
Yeah, sure. So, this is a pivotal moment in terms of culture and a really interesting time to wear the lens of a cultural anthropologist and studying people's behavior. But, eating with others is a uniquely human thing that we do. Yes, there are other animals who do it, but we are the only, group of animals that come together and cook and share a meal. And there isn't a real direct kind of evolutionary reason for doing it beyond the fact that it actually does have benefits for our physical health and our mental health. So eating with others triggers your killer T cells. So it actually boosts your immune system. So in this moment of time, actually restaurant culture and home cooking with others people is better, it's great for boosting your immune system. So you can make that excuse for cooking at home or going out to eat with friends and family. It also boosts your serotonin and dopamine, right? That there's just something innately therapeutic about spending time with others. Food tastes better when we are eating it with others. I recently saw a really interesting stat that was showing it actually tastes even better if it's an intergenerational meal. There are so many of these aspects about communal eating that are just deeply ingrained in who we are. Now, the digital age, which is something that I've focused a lot of my research on, has in many ways disrupted that communal eating. There are many of us who have substituted a lot of in-person time prior to the pandemic to really have a performative experience of food online. So we're focused more on getting the likes or the upvotes. There's many stories that you'll hear from people who say, well, I did it, or I went to this place because it looks really great on Instagram. And they're focused more on what the food looks like and the performance of that meal rather than the actual sharing of the meal. This is connected to rising rates of loneliness, dissatisfaction, envy, jealousy, If you've been following the drama of the Instagram, Facebook saga, I document a lot of this in Hungary, actually, because it is directly related to our current relationship with food. It really has been having a severe impact as well on what people are expecting from one another in terms of their food choices, but it has, again, disrupted that kind of communitarian hands-on togetherness. The benefit, of course, is right now we're in forced isolation. And so the digital age and social media has become, in many ways, a godsend. I mean, I felt like at the beginning of the pandemic, it was the first time that social media was kind. Instead of people ragging on each other, it kind of felt like, hey, here's my banana bread recipe, and here's how I started my victory garden, and we're all in this together, and we're gonna figure it out. And TikTok, I think for a lot of people, has become that place as well. There's cook-alongs, there's, I've seen a lot of bars doing kind of really great happy hour events online. It's become this way for us to break out of this moment of isolation. And it's different than prior to the pandemic when we had the option to be in person and a lot of us were choosing the screen versus now people are really trying to use the screen as a way to facilitate that in-person experience. The other great thing about this is it has encouraged us to experiment at home. And both Karen and Sam already were kind of talking about some of the emerging trends in home cooking. People are wasting less food. They're becoming more aware of their habits, their budgets. I remember seeing the early reports too of plastic waste, people realizing, oh my God, I'm seeing this pile up in my kitchen instead of being at their home office. But it's also about more family lunches. So there's this revolution in home cooking where it's not just happening at the end of the day, it's also happening at lunchtime. It's going to be really interesting to see post-pandemic whether people are willing to give up that family home cooking time of day that a lot of people are really starting to revel in. But this has also become an opportunity for people to connect food to climate issues, whether that's through food waste, or I thought it was super interesting that Marcus Samuelsson went vegetarian during the pandemic. I think there were a lot of people who did that, who took this as a moment to say, how can I turn my home kitchen into a way to express my values? And the same thing between the connections between food and racial justice, which Karen was touching on a bit. There's an amazing food sovereignty movement happening right now, an intersectional environmentalism movement happening right now. That's also showing up in our kitchens. It's showing up with the seeds that people are buying and growing, the recipes that people are diving into, and realizing that this is also a moment to reconnect with our heritages, to celebrate a diversity of cultures in the kitchen. And I think for a lot of people, reconnecting with their families' traditions from perhaps generations ago. So it's a really exciting time, and the home kitchens become the laboratory, the therapy space, the party zone for so many of us. And I do think that we're going to see coming out of this a real shift in the design of the kitchen, a shift in the ingredients that people are using, the materials they're using in the kitchen, and just the expectations coming out of a home cook's home.
Well, Eve, you gave us amazing thoughts and transitioned it to Jane so perfectly. But that is so true. And I think we can all relate to so many of the things that you talked about. And I love your perspective. I really could listen to all of you for hours on end. But Jane, if you would take it from there, you have a pulse on what we're looking at in the future of kitchens and sustainability and design and where and what we'll be cooking. I would love to hear, tell us the future, please, of kitchens.
Well, I definitely can do that. And I loved listening to Karen and Sam and Eve. You're all touching on things that I've been seeing and where the trends are going. And, the kitchen really is command central. And it needed to be, during the pandemic and our new reality, a very multifunctional spot, because so much is going on in the kitchen and so much is going on in the home. And what I'm seeing both at the height of the pandemic and now are really three major trends that are taking place in the home and in the kitchen. One is the desire to create a safe and sterile fortress. The germs, it's all about touchless and sensors and purifying. And it's interesting to see that there is an air to water generator that you can have installed in your home or outside your home, and it can support your water supply. And with times when either natural disaster and you're forced and you don't have water that comes into your home, or any issues with the community water, you want to have something that's safe. And there's these tools that are coming into the marketplace. Now it's still early, and there's a company called Sun to Water that's doing just this, and it's locating itself in areas of drought areas. So it's really helping people get water. Another really interesting new area is the smart doorbell. At CES, a company called Plot has introduced a doorbell that's the next generation of these visual doorbells where you can see who is there. But this one takes it a step further and can take the person's temperature that's standing outside before you let them enter. So again, it's helping you feel safe in your home. Air purifiers, robotics hasn't really gotten into the home yet. The biggest thing that really has gotten introduced into the mainstream is sort of the Roomba, the vacuum that will cycle through your house. Well, how about a robot that's an air purifier that does the similar thing where it'll circulate through your house? So there's this AirBot for $900. They're just launching it, and you can feel that your air is being purified. Now that's the one trend. The second trend is bringing the outside in. And Karen, you were talking about gardens. The extension of bringing your outside garden into your home through growing systems. And everyone has seen sort of the Aero gardens and the click and grows. But there's a new area that is launching and just starting to get into homes. It's a little bit more into restaurants, where there are these more sophisticated growing boxes, and they look like even slim refrigerators. So you can cultivate the seedling, move it to the top. And there's one company called Natufia. And what they do is they replicate the true outdoors, the sounds, the wind, the light, the water, so that you can grow in the same area that you're doing it outside, but you can do it inside. And so you've got fresh vegetables that you can have in your home. So again, you think about the security, the sustainability, the healthier it's for you growing your own vegetables. You can do it year round. So there's those pieces of equipment that's coming into the marketplace. The last area is sort of the expansion of the kitchen. And, the pandemic definitely spurred on a lot of kitchen trends, everything from the broken floor plan. So knowing, everyone used to love those open floor plans. Well, they didn't work too well during the pandemic because you were trying to study or have a Zoom meeting or do some meditation, and everyone was on top of each other. So people are taking these open floor plans and they're breaking them up. They're bringing in interesting ways of screening off rooms, or they're creating a workspace in a closet area. So that's a little bit of what's happening. But then there's handless designs. So getting back to the safe and sterile fortress, here are things that you can just sort of wave your hand by and the cabinet will open or the drawer will open. So you don't have to touch it, or you wave your hand by the faucet and the faucet turns on. So again, it's a safer environment. And the last two areas in this section are walk-in pantries. That's the new walk-in closet. So there has been this explosion of the butler pantry, the room that has all of your food storage. No one wants to be caught off guard again like we were at the beginning of the pandemic. Or as Sam had talked about, supply chain issues, going to the store and not being able to get the things you want. Before the pandemic, we never worried that we couldn't find yeast or that we couldn't find toilet paper. It was always there, but it wasn't after March 13th. So people don't want that to happen again. So they're finding ways to create these storage areas where they're never caught off guard. So those that have the benefit of reconstruction or renovation in their home, they're adding these rooms. Those that don't have that, they're putting shelving in their basement and they're using that to organize their supplies and having sort of the backup of items. And then the last area is the extension of the kitchen. And Eve, you spoke about, gathering together, but doing it in a safe way. And, people wanted to get outside again and be with friends. But if you can extend your kitchen to the outdoors, create little outdoor kitchens. It doesn't have to be fancy. People have, added workspace. They have their heating area. They have a sink where they can wash up. And then they're creating meals and having friends over in a safer environment. Or they have the luxury sometimes of having those long doors and windows where they can open up their kitchen and walk right out to their patio. They have that area of open air and bringing people together. So there's been a lot of really interesting things. There's more coming with wireless and cordless appliances and appliances being embedded with content. I could talk on for many more hours on this, but I will throw it back to you, Tara, if anyone has any questions.
Well, you gave us a very broad perspective and so fun to think about all those things. It's true. It's true. Innovation everywhere. And the temperature taking doorbell really throws me. You can stand in your kitchen cooking while you take your guest's temperature. But thanks, Jane. That was amazing. And we actually do have some time for Q&As, and we have some questions that have come in. And I am getting fed these questions because I can't navigate the chat room myself. So let me start with one. Karen, this is directed to you if you want to jump back on. What do you think is the best way to encourage home cooking?
Is sitting down with your family and talk about the essence of cooking. I tell young people, take out your Samsung Galaxies and your iPhones and talk to grandma, grandpa, abuela, abuelo about what it was to grow food, but what it was to cook food. Back in the day, we used to sit at the table and share a meal and tell stories. And that was lost. As we've come away from the land, we've lost our essence about agriculture. But now you're starting to see that. You're starting to see people talking about home cooking and recipes that were handed down from generation to generation. I know during the holidays, that's something that we do collectively. All of us get into the kitchen and remember, what did grandma do to put this little bit of ingredient in? Or what did auntie do to sort of stir up the pot? And so we're starting to have those conversations now, especially when people are starting to understand the importance of having food. And one thing I want to talk about too, because I think Jane brought up something very, very important what communities are doing. They're doing community fridges. That means that people who don't have access to food, they're setting up refrigerators outside in our communities, and people are putting in food so that people who don't have access to food can go in and get that food. So that's something that's changing, and that's something that's exciting now in my community.
Yeah, I love seeing those reports about that, and such a wonderful project. If any of the other panelists have on these questions that come in, if you want to just pop your hand up, I can bring you into the discussion. But we have one that came in for Sam. Sam, you were asked, what were home cooks asking for during the pandemic? And that's pretty broad, but what did you see them asking for?
No, it's a super interesting question. Just before I jump onto that, I think probably not the relevant audience, but what Karen was just saying about the community fridges is highly relevant for what happened for the last couple of years. We actually set up an organization called Make Veg Poverty History in the UK, where we actually set up Britain's first veggie food bank, as there was such a need for nutrition. There's actually a huge amount of food insecurity, even in London, one of the biggest and most expensive cities in the world. And I think one of the sort of most active things, if people are, I see a couple of questions coming up about helping communities, etc. And I think helping food banks is a hugely positive way to help in your local communities, because food insecurity is a growing problem. It's something that we're trying to tackle as a business rather than just standing on the sidelines. To jump into the trend question, the answer is it depended on which part of the last 2 years we were talking about. So initially, there was a return to huge traditional consumption. Lots of people who'd steered away from grains and bread and, dairy and comfort food all reverted back there really, really quickly, which was certainly in Europe. I don't think it was the same intensity in the US, which is, ultimately the cause of a lot of the branded food shortages on the shelves. As the pandemic continued, and certainly over the last year, people's focus went completely on health, alternative proteins. Our brand is a frozen, plant-based, better for you food brand. And the reason I say better for you instead of healthy is because obviously diet is subjective to everyone's needs, which, we don't have time to get into today. But the plant-based food consumption within the frozen aisle in particular absolutely skyrocketed for two reasons. One was because of the focus on health in the middle of a pandemic and people focusing on, how they could live their lifestyles more healthy for the future. And there's been a huge migration to veganism and vegetarianism as a result. But the other huge food trend that coincided with that was the move to frozen, on the basis that of something that Jane actually mentioned, which was this idea of having a bigger pantry. Now, I wish I had a walk-in frozen pantry at home. I don't just yet. But what we saw in the UK and Ireland in particular was selling appliances vendors selling out of freezers for stocking large amounts of food over a longer period of time. So as a result of that, people are moving much more towards the frozen aisle than they ever did before. The perception of it being a negative space is moving away from people's minds. And actually, thankfully for us, we're able to tell much more of a story about how we're trying to fix the freezer aisle at the same time as there's been a migration to that pantry loading. I think ultimately the food trends that we're seeing, in addition to the ones I just mentioned, are probably the most prominent one is functional food, having vitamins and minerals and supplements wrapped into the products that you consume on a day-to-day. Soft drinks and beverages, basic foods that would have been very, very simple previously are now starting to contain things which create an entire meal and a total nutrition, which is a very buzzy word that you hear in trend forecasting at the moment. Almost moving towards some sort of future state of food by design is I believe where we're going to. So there's some of the things that we saw over the last couple of years.
That's fascinating. Thanks, Sam. And I think that translates to any country, and ours as well, as you're seeing those trends in the UK and Ireland. I have a question. We have a few more minutes for Eve. What is the most surprising technological change you've seen in the kitchen since the pandemic? And do you believe these changes are positive or negative for the community?
I think that'd probably be a great question for Jane as well. But I mean, I'll say from my perspective, I think the tech that's been growing over the last couple of years has been the air fryer and the Instant Pot. And that's based on no major evaluation other than my social media feeds and stories from friends. But I do think that it's things that are helping people kind of replicate the dining out experience, especially with the air fryer, right? A textural experience that people have a hard time recreating at home. It's really intimidating to get out, a pot of oil and fry something. And, as Sam was just talking about, there's the health concerns. Instant Pot, I think, is also just kind of again, it's time saving. While it feels like some of us have had more time during the pandemic, most of us have been working more hours. So it's also about how do you have a nutritious meal with your family. And so funny, Jane, that you talk about walk-in pantries, because I just renovated a house, and what did I put in? A walk-in pantry for all of our dried goods. And we eat a mainly plant-based diet. We do have food security in mind. I like having a lot of dried goods available at all times. It's also really good for the budget, for the family budget. And the Instant Pot has become, our best friend for quickly making beans or rice or farro or millet or whatever it's going to be. So I do think that the technologies that are at least rising to the surface right now, if they're in any way facilitating healthy meals and alleviating people's anxieties in the kitchen, I think that that is only a good thing. I will say there are certain aspects of tech coming to the surface that make me nervous, especially on refrigerators, where it's almost like you have an iPad on your refrigerator. I don't think that you need to get news notifications while you're eating dinner. And to the question of, how do you encourage home cooking, home meals, much like Karen, I would say, have a kind of Sabbath for your devices. There needs to be a time of day where your family walks in the house and you say, okay, the phones are going to sleep over here. Let's all get together and cook a meal and eat a meal. I am nervous about technology entering the kitchen in such a way that it disrupts even that kind of connection between families, because whether you are aware of it or not, the second that you get a notification on your watch or on your phone, your attention is being pulled away, even if you don't actually look at the notification. There is still a part of your mind that is saying, you need to check your phone. There's something there waiting for you, and your attention is not fully on your family. So I think that there's plus and minuses to all of these different technologies, and I'm excited about a lot of the innovations that are developing, and also some of them that are just deeply analog, like bringing more plants indoors and growing on your windowsill or your fire escapes. There's so many different ways to kind of green your space to practice your green thumb. I started gardening in my Brooklyn apartment on my fire escape, and now I finally moved to a place where I have outdoor space and have raised beds, little at a time.
Yeah, it's true. And even as we decide to make a Sabbath for those devices, that's hard, right? As technology creeps into every part of our life in the kitchen. So during that dinner time, we're using that technology and such. So we have to be very aware of where that's coming in and these new trends and things. And Jane, I would love to hear your tag onto that, because yes, it's very relevant to your expertise. And also for you, we had one come in as we continue to cook more at home. What food trends do you see emerging and supporting local businesses and things?
So getting to sort of the appliances, I have to say that the appliances that are winning in the kitchen are appliances that are helping people get their meals made easily and taking the stress away from the dinner time when you're frazzled and needing to get something done. Even with being at home, as you said, I mean, you're sometimes busier than when you had been, and you want to have a good cooked meal for your family or whomever you're eating with, and it takes time. And the biggest fear for people is, I don't know how to do this. So how can you help them easily do that? So the multi-cooker, the Instant Pot, a huge winner because it did that. It made things easy, and it was just more than one product. Air fryer, as you said, it's like, how can I get fried things at home that are a little bit healthier? And I'm afraid of that oil. The other thing is, the types of ways people are cooking and sort of the trends that I've been seeing and I think are going to be continuing is the whole global experience of foods and being able to experience foods from different countries, because, travel has been stopped. And we're just now starting again, but people want to experience the foods around the world because they aren't traveling. So I've seen a huge leap in that area. Now, the key is that if you are creating recipes for home cooks, that it has to be doable and easy and things that they can source and not make it complicated. Because again, like I said, there's limited time and sometimes limited skills. So how can you make it easy for everybody? But global is one really, really big area. And comfort foods, as Sam said, I mean, that's what the whole craziness and the chaoticness of the world, you want comfort at home and gathering around the table and sharing and talking and enjoying the people you are with.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jane. That is very insightful. And we have a couple more minutes left. If Karen, we had a request. Let me find it in my, okay, Karen, we had a request for you to sort of wrap us up with your mantra for 2022 and beyond. Tell us what we should do.
So I think that we need to look at the food system as a whole to make sure that everybody has a right to food that is healthy, that the food system is just, that the food system is equitable. For the person that puts that seed in the ground, to the person that delivers that plate on your table, make sure that it's fair, it's just, and it's equitable. And start asking those hard questions about where did that food come from? Who were the people who grew that food? Or who are the people who served your food? To make sure that we pay homage to those people, because right now we know who the essential workers are: the farm workers, the restaurant workers, the retail workers, the chefs, the cooks. Everyone along the food chain needs to be celebrated.
Thank you so much. That is so true, right? I see your hands, Eve. Yep, we're all clapping on Zoom. Thank you. This has been such a great night. What wonderful panel discussions and answers from all of you. Thank you to Karen, Sam, Eve, Jane, and to our keynote speakers, Marcus Samuelsson and Grace Young. This has been awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to actually turn the grand finale over to Jen again, and she is going to announce our raffle winners. But thank you for having me. Thank you for being here. This has been wonderful.
Thanks, Tara. I agree. What an illuminating event. And I feel like this conversation could go on. There's so much to cover. But we're going to have a little fun part of the event now, and that is our raffle. We're so excited to be able to give away these prizes. And the first is from our sponsor, Kerrygold. I mean, I'm drooling over this, to be quite honest. It's a gift pack that includes 4 wedges Kerrygold Dubliner cheese, 4 wedges Kerrygold Blarney Castle cheese, 4 wedges of Kerrygold Skellig, 2 wedges Kerrygold Reserve Cheddar, 4 packs of Kerrygold Pure Irish Butter, and 4 packs Kerrygold Unsalted Butter. Estimated retail value, $200. And the winner of this amazing gift pack is Gerald Eber. So Gerald will be emailing you after the event to coordinate the shipment of this gift pack to you. The next one is, we have 2 giveaways from Strong Roots. They call it the Strong Roots Blank Cookbook. It's a beautiful hardback stencil illustrated cookbook where basically they are encouraging you to fill in your own recipes utilizing their ingredients. And so the 2 winners for the Strong Roots Cookbook, Blank Cookbook are Meryl Evans and Arlene Mead. Meryl Evans and Arlene Mead, congratulations. That's awesome. All right, the third is a copy of Eve Turo-Paul's Hungry, which is a guided tour through the stranger corners of today's global food and lifestyle culture. And the winner of that is Amy Zavato, Journalist of the Day. Congratulations. And finally, we have a copy of our moderator's new delicious cookbook. And that's from Tara Bench. And the winner there is Solina Bernabe. And I think that's it. What a fantastic collection of giveaways, and we thank everyone for that. Just one final point. Again, we're so thankful to all of our speakers, to the organizer, Michelle, and of course to Tara for moderating this conversation. And we will be sending out a recap to our attendees. We will try to answer any questions that way afterwards that were not addressed. And also we encourage you to keep your eyes out for our annual Next Big Sip event, which focuses on drink culture, wine and spirits, and non-alcoholic beverages, which will likely take place in early February. So keep that keep that in your ears and eyes, and more details to come. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. And have a great night.